We're jumping in again where we left off, and we've been rolling through popular objections to the reconciliation of all things. This will be number 18, reading from my book, The Noble Berean Series, Volume 3. And we are now starting a discussion on the word fire and what the word fire means when it is used in the Scriptures. Very great and needed study that everyone ought to go through to really understand what biblical fire is referring to. So let's jump on in here and start reading. When discussing the reconciliation of all things with those who are opposed to or in denial of this great truth, one of the main objections used by eternal torture supporters is that the Bible speaks of fire, and more specifically, hellfire, unquenchable fire, and the lake of fire. Hellfire, unquenchable fire, and the lake of fire are often used by many in evangelical Christianity to strike fear in the hearts of their listeners. The three categories of fire just mentioned are almost always spoken of in a literal sense, and there is little to no explanation of the meaning and purpose of fire spoken of as it relates to how this word is used throughout the Scriptures. Most claim that the fire spoken of in these instances is a literal fire that is designed to do nothing more than to torture and inflict pain on individuals. And of course they will say that this condition is to last for all eternity. Have you ever really stopped and thought about that for a moment? Can you imagine burning someone in a literal fire forever with no other purpose in mind than to inflict endless and senseless torture? Wow, that is insane. Do we condone this type of behavior as humans in our societies? How would someone be treated or handled if they were to burn someone alive in literal fire? Would this not be a crime and treated accordingly, being condemned by our law enforcement and judicial systems? Surely this type of behavior is vile, to say the least. There must be a meaning and purpose that we are missing when and if we speak of hellfire, unquenchable fire, and the lake of fire, and make no mention of the spiritual quality and purpose of this fire. According to Dr. Harold Lovelace, check again in your concordance, and you will find verses that read, Holy Ghost and fire, hellfire, unquenchable fire, ministers a flame of fire, fiery indignation, God is a consuming fire, lake of fire and brimstone, and the overcomers stand on a sea of glass mingled with fire. These terms are all from the same Greek word, number 4442, P-U-R. Therefore, it is the same fire in all these places. Now notice that in Mark 14:54, when Peter warmed himself by a fire, it is a different Greek word. End quote. Read and search God's Plan, Dr. Harold Lovelace. According to J. Preston Eby, the word burn means combustion or to consume. To consume does not mean to annihilate, for there is no such thing as annihilation in the absolute sense. When fire consumes a log in your fireplace, it does not destroy any of the elements within the log. It merely changes their form. Combustion is the process by which chemicals combine to form new chemicals. For example, a tree might be cut down, sawed into firewood, and burned. When the wood is burning, the heat causes the chemicals of which the wood is composed to vaporize, mixing with the oxygen in the air to form new chemicals, including water and the gas carbon dioxide. So what was formerly a tree is no longer identified as the form of a tree, but the substance thereof is now simply changed into a different form and exists in its new form within the atmosphere as water, carbon dioxide, etc. Thus, to burn means to change. Did you get that? To burn means to change. Furthermore, it is interesting to note that fire does not burn down. It always burns up. It seeks the highest level, and all that it consumes goes up in smoke to exist in a new form in a higher dimension. Even if you take a pan of water and place it over a fire, before long the water will take on the property of the fire and will begin to go up in steam. To burn means to change, and the change is always upward in its motion. To burn means to change, and the change is always upward in its motion. Fire is the heat and light that you feel and see when something burns. It takes heat to start a fire, but once the fire is started, it produces heat that keeps the process going. Thus, fire is really heat and light. End quote. The Lake of Fire, J. Preston Eby. With this in mind, we are now able to see the purpose of God's consuming fire in our lives. This spiritual fire that comes from God is for the purpose of consuming and destroying the man of sin that is within us. God's fire works within us to consume our wood, hay, and stubble. He burns up our old nature, the propensity within us to sin, by the brightness of His coming or His presence. In turn, His fire changes us from one form to another. God's fire changes us from one form to another. The more we begin to understand the purpose of God's fire, the less we fear it. We'll stop there now, and next time we're going to get into reading some of the scriptures about fire and explaining what they mean, spiritually speaking. So thank you for joining us in this teaching.